Hi, everybody. Welcome to Glow with Grace. I am really excited today to share an interview with you with the fabulous Veronika Robinson, who, if you don't know about her work already, she is an author. She's the founder of the Mother magazine, a natural parenting magazine. She's a mother and a wife and an editor and an astrologer and a mentor and all kinds of amazing things. You can go and check her out right now on veronica.robinson.com if you want to kind of have that to have a look at. That's Veronika with a K. Thank you so much for joining us, Veronika. I'm really, really excited to talk with you today.
You're welcome.
So I feel like this is such a blessing and such a privilege to talk to you because you've had so much experience in the last couple of decades, I guess, with natural parenting and, raising your own daughters, but also, your books and the Mother magazine and the family camps that you ran around the Mother magazine, all these things. I feel like you're such a wealth of knowledge. And the topic that I especially wanted to focus in on today is this idea of how do we create and maintain really strong families in the sense that everybody, kind of stays together, sticks together. And I've mentioned to you before that I feel like your family to me is kind of like a role model of this. You have two teenage daughters. I mean, at least from, what I see of you guys, I feel like you're such an amazing example of a really strong family who sticks together and has, a lot of love and creativity between them. Maybe you could kind of give us a little bit of background to begin with of, your family and kind of how you came to be doing what you're doing and sharing with the world.
hmm in many ways, probably through my own childhood, because my mother was, to use a common term, she was an alternative parent. So she used colour healing, for example, instead of taking us to the doctor. If I was ever sick, instead of being, nursed in bed, she'd put me on the trampoline out in the sun. She solarized our water, all those sorts of things. So that was just how we were raised. And I never really thought any differently about it. She would get up at 5 in the morning and meditate and do yoga and, the Kriya yoga exercises and things like that. And then still managed to have freshly squeezed orange juice ready when we woke up. And so she was a really dynamic woman who had a lot of interest in nutrition and, various ideas, if you like, around healthcare, well-being, spirituality. So I suppose it was only natural when I was going to become a mother myself that some of that influence would be there. Not that I've tried to replicate what she did by any means, and some aspects of parenting that I do are quite different from her. But that idea, that we are more than the physical body, for example, has been really strong. So for my daughters, choosing a water birth, the idea of home birth, of breastfeeding, that was all second nature in many ways. And then obviously when you get into parenting, you're so busy being a parent that you're just going from day to day, but you also grow and evolve, and by the nature of perhaps parenting outside the box, if you like, is that you do research as well as listening to your own intuition. And then, of course, by the nature of my work with Mother magazine, I was fully immersed in that as well, on a professional level too. But, when you're saying about, in terms of our family, one of the nicest things I ever heard was actually not that long ago. We're in our local coffee shop, bookshop, and just having a drink together as a family. And one of the regular women said, I just love seeing you all together. You just look like such a happy family. And I was really touched. And obviously she only sees us when we're in there for half an hour or whatever. She doesn't see, the days where we're not perhaps rubbing along so well together because, we're human.
Right.
We fall out and whatever. But one of the strongest things that I feel is that with attachment parenting in particular, it's not just about the first 6 months of life or, once they're out of the sling or whatever. It's the whole of parenting. So, for example, I've got a daughter going off to university in 6 months, And I still feel like an attachment parent. And I suspect that will be there even when she's left. And by attachment parenting, I don't mean that you're physically holding them close. I mean that you're emotionally there, you're available for them.
Beautiful.
And I think one of the things, especially with having teenagers now, it's about remembering when you were a teenager, because it's very easy to, especially if you're disagreeing about something, but, stepping into perhaps a more authoritative role or whatnot, and just remembering, actually, I know what that feeling was like when you didn't want to be told what to do or how to do it or when to do it, and that huge need for freedom. So, I haven't stopped learning as a parent. It's a constant learning. And I suspect that's not going to change even in 10 or 20 years from now.
Wow. What age are your daughters right now?
18 and 16.
Okay. And I know they have various wonderful talents that they share with the world. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
They are amazing, actually, and I can get a bit choked up sometimes, thinking, God, they actually came out of my body. Genes went into there. So Bethany is a composer. She's written a musical for musical theatre.
Oh, wow.
She's really talented. She plays violin. She's just sat her grade 8 piano exam. She plays flute and guitar. Obviously loves writing music, also singing. Singing something she's just gotten into recently in terms of singing publicly. Her plan when she goes to university is to specialise in composition, but also conducting. She's been involved with the local youth orchestra and is feeling very strongly that because she has such a good ear for all the instruments and the patterns and the various sounds of being in an orchestra, that she would like to conduct. So that's where she's at the moment with that. But yeah, anything to do with music, she's right there. That's her thing. My daughter Eliza has written 7 novels, 2 of which published so far. And where she's at the moment is torn. She doesn't want to do just one thing. I think that's her frustration. So she would like to be a writer, but she'd also like to be, for example, a book acquisitions editor at a publishing house, choosing which books get published. But she's also passionate about travelling the world, so, perhaps doing some sort of travel journalism as well. But, she's 16, she's got all the time in the world.
Wow.
And for both of them, one of the things I've always said to them, right from little, is there is no hurry for you to choose what you want to do. It's just important that you do what you love. And they're both just so lucky that they've found what they love. Because it's so easy to spend 20, 30, 50 years even and not have a sense of what you love. I've got a friend who's my age, which is late 40s, who still doesn't have any passion for life or a sense of what she wants to do. And I find that a real tragedy. Not just for her, but any human that doesn't have that sense of wanting to bounce out of bed because life's got so much to offer. And so I hope, certainly with our children, that they've had parents as living examples who are passionate about their life, and that we've been a role model in that way. I suspect they'll both leave home as soon as they're able in terms of university or whatever choices they have, but they also know that a home is home, as long as I'm on the planet, if you like.
Right.
That the arms are always open.
Lovely. And with your girls, I'm curious about, were they homeschooled, unschooled? Have they been to school?
They were homeschooled until just 6 months ago.
Oh my goodness.
I know. They went briefly for a couple of months, I think when they were about 11 and 9, but they didn't last very long, didn't like it at all. But 6 months ago, the oldest one, Bethany, decided that she perhaps should at least go and get a qualification in music to help with getting into university.
Right.
And then Eliza decided, well, actually, she might go in as well. And what I find fascinating is, for example, because they had such a free-range childhood, if you like, and only had to learn what they wanted to learn, there was nothing forced on. So Eliza, didn't do any maths or science, neither of them did, but Eliza is now, teachers are saying, actually, you need to be at the top of the highest levels in these subjects because you're just picking it all up and doing it so well. And I think, apart from the fact she is an intelligent girl, but what happens is when a child is ready to learn, they'll learn it. And whether that's with reading or writing or maths or whatever subject, the student needs to be ready. Right. And she was obviously really ready to learn those things.
Wow, that's amazing. And what's their kind of opinion on school, having not been there until that age? What do they think of it?
Yeah, it's been a challenge in some ways because obviously this is a generalisation, but my experience often with homeschooled children is that they have been treated not as little people to control or that people that don't have an opinion. It's certainly in this house, they're treated as equals. Mm-hmm. So to then go into a system that doesn't work like that is difficult. But also the majority of people that they're in classes with don't want to be there. They don't want to learn. There's no interest. They're disruptive. They're living on lollies, sugar, whatnot, Coca-Cola for breakfast, the whole thing. And that has its challenges. Yeah. Having said that, they have made some lovely friends as well.
That's nice.
Some like-minded people. But yeah, it has certainly come with challenges, which has, as a mother, made me really glad that they weren't in there from, 4 or 5 years of age, that they'd had all these years to get a strong sense of who they are and what they want in life. Because, that saying about you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Yeah. And so if you've grown up with people that perhaps aren't so good for your soul, that does impact you. Right. So I do feel they have a stronger sense of who they are by having been away from that.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of homeschooling or unschooling, I'm sure there's going to be people listening to this who aren't familiar with that, and they're going to have the classic homeschooling question in their mind of how did your children get socialized if they were at home? And I'm sure you must have answered this like hundreds of times already, but do you want to kind of cover that a little bit for us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is, and I think this is most fundamentally important, is that you don't lock your children in a cupboard. They are socializing with you every day. You're having conversations with them. You're making eye contact. You're hugging them. That's socialization. It doesn't have to be with 30 other kids their own age. It's about having another human acknowledge you and essentially witness your journey. So, if the child is getting that, then they are being socialized. There's no question about that. In terms of being with people their own age and peers, obviously you can join different groups and there are other ways around that. In our case, we've lived rurally for, certainly the last 15 years, and that does come with its challenges, especially when you're in a place like we are where like-minded people are pretty thin on the ground at the best of times. But, if you live in a place with a thriving home education community, you're going to be able to tap into that sort of environment more easily. Right. But, as I say, if you've got friends or if you, even if you haven't got friends, if you're with your children, you can go to bookshops, you can go to libraries, just going on picnics. As long as you're interacting with each other, they're learning how to socialise. Because those skills are the same whether you're talking with a 30-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 3-year-old. Right. I think we get really caught up into this idea about communicating with people your own age, and it just doesn't work like that. Right. Because we are more than our physical body, we are more than our birth date. We are living, vibrant beings, and that's what our children are learning to relate to. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I see my children interacting with people, I think, well, actually, their social skills are way better than people I know have been to school the whole time. For example, I was in a supermarket this morning, and, the checkout operator, and my husband said, oh, her social skills, as we walked away, because, that inability to smile and make eye contact. Right. And I thought, well, my children can do that. They can do it with a complete stranger. And that's presumably what any parent would want for their child, is that they can relate to another human being. You don't need school for that. Right. School doesn't teach you that. And actually, having said that, some of the teachers in their school, for instance, when I've gone up to them, for whatever reasons, had to go in there, and their inability to make eye contact or meet you, if you like, halfway as a human being. So we need to really get out of this idea that school's the be-all and end-all of everything we ever learn, because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Schools have their place, but they're not the only place to learn.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So I want to go into this area of, we've already been touching into things that obviously affect this, how to create and maintain a strong family connection. But, for me as a new parent, we have a daughter who's 2 years and 4 months. Personally, one of my biggest concerns being a parent is that she might kind of like go away from us, kind of like drift away from us. And I know that this is coming from my own experience growing up and kind of my family karmic loop. Yeah, I read the book Hold On to Your Kids by Gabor Mate, and that really spoke to me about how, especially with the kind of modern schooling system, children tend to kind of orient towards each other more than towards adults. And this is just something that, I'm really strongly feeling is I want to do the best that I can to create, and keep a really solid relationship with my daughter and any other children if we have them. And so, this is why I'm so kind of excited to talk to you. And I almost feel like frustrated because it's like, I know that there must be so much great information in your head, and it's like, oh, what do I ask to get all the tips that I want to hear? So, I guess maybe we just start with, what kind of first comes to your mind around this theme? Like, what are the things that you have done over the years that most kind of speak to you as what's helped to keep your family together?
I think there are a lot of things.
Yeah.
One of the most fundamental things we can do as a family is to eat meals together. I think it's something like 57% of families don't share meals, and they eat in up to 4 different rooms.
Wow.
That whole idea of breaking bread, to use a biblical term if you like, is because humans are social. We come together to eat. And if you take that away from a family, which is just, obviously becoming increasingly more common, in terms of kids sitting at their computer or watching television in their bedroom or whatever, you're missing these great opportunities on a daily basis to connect. When you sit at a dining table and you're looking across from each other, aren't you? You're making eye contact. So for us, there's that sense of when we sit down and we express gratitude for the meal we've got. We might light a candle or have some gentle music on, but it's just that time to come and slow down and be together as a family. Whether you do that 3 times a day or 1 time a day, it's not so much as important as that you are doing it. In terms of the child growing away from the parent, I think a certain amount of that is inevitable because that's part of being a teenager, that psychologically crossing the river, if you like, away from the parent because you have to go off on your own life journey, and a certain sense of breaking that umbilical cord. It doesn't mean you can't have a golden thread connecting you as you go through life. But the child, it comes back to that Kyle Gibran saying your children are not your children.
Right.
They're the sons of life longing for itself. And so, we do obviously want to hang on to our children psychologically, emotionally, physically, but they also need to have that freedom to move away. And so the holding on really comes from just knowing that you're there. It's a bit like, when the child starts toddling and, he or she is taking their first steps away, so they look back and check mum's still there and then they go a bit further. And the same process applies when they're ready to leave the nest at, 16, 18, 20. That sense, just knowing that it's there, that there is that somewhere to come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of communication with your children, are there any things around that you feel have been especially useful? For example, I'm really interested in nonviolent communication. Is that something that you guys are into, or anything along those lines?
It's a difficult area because sometimes when I hear people using nonviolent communication, it often doesn't feel real to me. It
Yeah.
feels like they're forcing something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I find it quite a turn off,
Yeah.
actually. And I'm not saying it's not valid or not real. I think it's just that it becomes an intellectual thing rather than a heart-based
Right.
way of communication.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I'm not trying to dismiss it as a concept at all. I'm just talking about my experience of it.
Yeah.
What I would say, in relation to that, and also in relation to holding your children close, if you like, is that one of the reasons that our children turn away is because they see us not being authentic, not just with them, but with life. So if I could sum everything up, it would be authentic. That's all you have to do. You know, in terms of be authentic with who you are as a human being, how you relate to other people. You know, they say about what integrity, what it is who you are when you're alone. And, you know, our children read us. Even if they don't say anything, they pick up everything. So if you're being clear about who you are, you're not pretending to be someone else, then that's what they witness. And they have no reason to then walk away. In that sense. Obviously, they walk away into their life and the life they're creating, but they don't need to walk away from the relationship.
Right. So, kind of on the other side of this picture, if we look at it that way, what kind of things do you think are some of the things that parents do that most kind of drive children away? You just mentioned like being inauthentic. What are some other things that we could maybe be paying attention to that might not be the best practices in terms of having that strong connection with our children?
It's such a fine line. I often think in terms of the relationship I have with my children that things we talk about are just so different from what I might have spoken about with my mother at, you know, a similar age. And I don't know how much of that is a generational thing and that it was different then, or because my parents were from a different culture or whatever, but I feel like our relationship is very open. Sometimes a bit too open for their liking, and that there are things that they don't want to discuss with me. You know, they'll say, go off and talk to your girlfriends about it, not us. Really, it's just about, I think we get so caught up in being busy, you know, in this culture.
Right.
And so then families come home and they sit and watch television or whatever it is, instead of just that slowing down, connecting, you know, for example, around the dining table or whatever. And it's about recognising, you know, there's a lovely phrase that we come from the same place as time. And if we can just remember that we actually have all the time in the world, and then we can remember that and we live that, then we're not rushing about. And when we're not rushing about, then we've actually got time to listen to our teenagers or children of any age, for example. You know, with any relationship, it's not just mother or father and child, any relationship where you need to be intimate, you need to feel safe.
Right.
And if you don't feel safe, you're not as likely to open up.
Right.
You know, it's just a fact, really. So it's our children need to be able to trust us. They need to know if they come to us about something that, you know, it's private, it's confidential. You know, for example, sometimes one of our children will say something to one parent and they'll say, I don't want you to tell, you know, the other parent. And that's really hard if you're a couple that likes to share everything.
Right.
But the child needs to know that they can trust you, that, you know, it's just between you and them. So again, we're talking about being authentic and honesty. You know, which it's not always easy. We're not brought up in this culture to be honest.
Right.
You know, if we looked at it, we'd probably realise we tell little white lies and fibs everywhere we go.
Yeah.
You know, because we're trying to protect people or because it's easier or whatever. But they just start mounting up, and you know, we live behind this wall, if you like.
Yeah. So, you kind of touched into something there that I'd like to look at a bit more. That, you know, we live in this society where everything kind of seems to go faster and faster, and people are more and more kind of busy all the time. I'm wondering, especially in terms of mothers, what kind of guidance would you have for, especially a new mama who, you know, they're maybe trying to do their very best to do kind of attachment parenting with their child, and they maybe have this kind of like modern fast-paced lifestyle thing going on, and they've got to take care of their own needs as well. Like, what does that look like?
Well, firstly, I think attachment parenting and busy lifestyle are incompatible. One of the things I've heard so often is, the whole continuum parenting thing is unrealistic in this modern world. Well, that was never my experience. It's about choice, and it's like, well, if this is how you want to bring up your children, then that needs to be your priority.
Right.
Not, being at a coffee morning every morning, or, 5 different play groups or whatever.
Yeah.
And, even little toddlers, they don't need to be out all the time. They need a gentle daily rhythm.
Great.
And I just don't think we do ourselves or our children any favours when we're that busy.
Yeah.
We can, there's plenty to do in the home or the garden or local community without having to actually be out all the time. But as I say, it's a choice. And for some people, it's not about, they may think it's about going out and meeting with friends or, socialising the baby or whatever like that. But actually, I feel it comes from a fear of being alone. And, if we don't enjoy our own company, no one's actually ever going to be able to satisfy, that emptiness that's inside, if you like. Right. And also the other thing is when you have a baby or a little child, again, a lot of people feel the need to get out, or they have this idea that babies are boring. And I never found that. When my little baby's sitting in the front pack in front of me looking at my face and we're communicating all day long, how can that be boring? It's beautiful. You're creating this relationship. Right. Even from the brand new newborn days, there's this constant communication going on. And, when you've got that, and it's so beautiful and amazing, why do you actually need to be out elsewhere all the time? Yeah. Maybe I'm being a little bit black and white, but that was certainly my experience. Yeah. Was that they were satisfying, complete relationships.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for going into that. I feel the same way. And in fact, one of the first kind of attachment parenting families who I ever met, this was quite some years ago, I remember the mother telling me, like, I don't do more than like kind of one big activity a day with my children. I just don't, we don't, like go to the park and to the cinema and go-karting and bowling and all in one day. We just do one thing, and then, most of the rest of the time we're at home and, we're doing our things together. And that really spoke to me, even as, someone who didn't have children yet. It just spoke to me just from my own life. I was like, yeah, that really feels right, to be slowing down more. And now, especially with a young child who is very sensitive, I don't feel to do almost anything, almost anywhere, like kind of beyond just the kind of... Yeah.
That's a really interesting point you're saying about her being sensitive, because, that's not uncommon to have a child or even a parent who is highly sensitive. And then, so for example, if you have a highly sensitive child, but you've got a mum who wants to be out 7 days a week, there's sort of an incompatibility going on there.
Right.
And the mother, being the adult, needs to make compromises.
Right.
Find a way to meet her needs somewhere else, because it isn't fair for a sensitive child to constantly be going into environments which she might see as harsh.
Yeah. Yes. Another thing that people kind of bring towards us on various occasions are this idea of consequences and natural consequences with young children, which, you were talking about authenticity, and I feel like we strive to try to be as authentic as we can in our communication with our daughter, even though, she's very young. I felt, she understands everything. And, this thing of consequences and natural consequences, I find it quite bizarre, that I wouldn't treat adults in that way. So why would I treat her in that way? Maybe you could just kind of talk to us a little bit about that whole concept of consequences.
Well, I think it's that we, again, it's a cultural thing where children are treated different to adults. And if we just treat them as human beings and relate to them that way, we're respecting them for a start. And, children do learn what works and what doesn't work, and, how we function in groups, and about respect and all those sorts of things. That just happens naturally.
Right.
They don't need to have rules, and you can have boundaries by all means. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But that whole idea of being, an authoritative figure, if you like, it doesn't need to happen in that way when you're having those loving-based bonds happening.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Something that I always feel in intimate relationships is that it's so important that feelings come first before anything else, like in terms of the priorities of, kind of the to-do list and what happens next and all that kind of stuff. I mean, everybody has to-do lists, right? But I feel like, if your child or your partner or whoever is in an other than kind of happy state, and, they have something going on, then that's what's got to come first. Is that kind of something that's guided your, parenting and relationships as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As far as possible, there are some times in life where actually things have to be overridden for whatever reason. But in general, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The feelings have to be honoured.
Yeah. And what about for anyone who's listening who maybe they feel like they are quite disconnected from either their children or from their own parents, and they maybe want to kind of bridge that gap a bit more, and maybe it's been years that they feel like this disconnection's been going on. Do you have any ideas for how people could maybe connect a bit more strongly?
Well, any relationship that you have, it grows and develops when you invest in it. And the most fundamental way to invest in a relationship is through the time you give to it, the time and the love. So, for example, you might be a mum who feels detached from your baby. So one way around that would be to start carrying your baby more, or sleeping in the same bed with your baby. And with any relationship of any age, it's eye contact, that the eyes being the mirror to the soul, if you like. Eye contact and touch and just listening, that stopping what you're doing and being fully present for a person.
Yes.
And the more you do that, the more it builds up, and it's like putting money in the bank, it just adds up and adds up.
Yeah.
I think often what happens with when you're an adult and you're trying to heal a relationship with a parent, there can be challenges from that. If a parent's particularly stubborn, for example, and you can heal any relationship without actually having to speak to the other person. The healing takes place within. That's what forgiveness is about. It's that inside job, if you like. But in terms of how you relate on that day-to-day level, it's also recognising that our parents did the best they could. I know sometimes it's easy to look and think, well, actually, rubbish. They didn't. They were crap or whatever. But they did. It sounds a bit trite to say, but we are all doing the best we can.
Yeah.
Even in a moment when we think, actually, I've been, really terrible or whatever.
Yeah.
That's all you were capable of in that moment.
Right.
Because you were tired or dehydrated or fed up or whatever the case was. And, most of the time, if we're in a situation where we're looking after ourselves, our nutritional status was good, we've had plenty of sleep, we're feeling good, we've been laughing, we're going to react in a completely different way. And then we'll function, to the best of our ability in that case.
Yeah. I have a more kind of esoteric question that I think you probably have some insight on. I'm so curious your thoughts about how much is kind of nature and how much is nurture with a child, because I've heard such differing opinions. There's this idea of, we come in like fully kind of programmed with our blueprint, and we choose our parents on purpose, and it kind of almost doesn't really matter, that kind of idea, like you're going to be who you're going to be. And then the other side is, it very much matters how you do everything, and of course, there's no black and white. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Right. This is where I cringe a little bit because I remember very clearly stating on radio when my girls were toddlers, nurture, nurture, nurture. You know, it's all about nurture. But
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point where it's like, I think that nature's the big one.
Oh, really?
However, it doesn't mean that nurture's not important. Obviously it is. It's crucial.
Yeah.
But we arrive with 7 generations worth of stuff from both sides of the family.
Yeah.
Before we even get out of the womb, we have got so much patterning and problems and good stuff as well. You know, I look at my daughter, the musician, and think, oh yeah, I can see, the relatives that's come from or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But we're just born with so much stuff before we start.
Yeah.
What happens with that stuff, where we go from that, that's where the nurture comes in.
Yeah.
But, if you're an attachment parent and you think, I'm going to have these perfect children because I'm, I've had this water birth upside down in a, Mongolian yurt by candlelight or whatever, sorry, it just doesn't work like that. It doesn't, and I think it's really important to be honest about that our children are people within themselves.
Right.
They've inherited stuff, and then as they arrive on this planet or in the process in the womb, what they're picking up from us, and then they're translating it the whole time.
Right.
So when they arrive, they may have come, for example, from generations that have had a poverty consciousness. Now, if the mum is there and she's not picking the baby up when it's crying, or she's bottle feeding it, but the bottle feeding's every 4 hours, that's just going to amplify every pattern of poverty ever was.
Yeah.
Now, if the mum is there and she's breastfeeding on cue and she's doing everything she can to meet the biological expectation, that is there for all human beings, that's going to start at some level trying to, do a bit of healing, if you like, from the ancestral patterning.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it's black and white. I think there's, and certainly for me as a parent, and I think that's where astrology helped as well, really understanding my daughters and what they've brought with them and where they're going, if you like, in their life. And myself as well and what I had. But as a parent, to be able to stand back and say, actually, I really did the best I could, but I can't take responsibility for all of that.
Yeah.
Because you just can't.
Yeah.
You're one or two people trying to shape this human being, and actually, at another level, it's quite egotistical to think that you can.
Right.
You can do a certain amount, and then, you have to look at the people who've had really rotten childhoods, and yet, despite all that, they've come out and been these amazing philanthropists or, the movers and shakers of the world.
Yeah.
In the end, it all comes down to choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. My sister and I, obviously, we had the same parents, but I feel like, we've gone such completely different paths in life, and our kind of familial relationships are so different, and our ideas and everything, and it's so fascinating to now be parents ourselves, and, just kind of looking at that and like, wow, what happens next, Yeah.
And well, I'm one of 8 children, and so there's 20 years between the oldest and the youngest, and just seeing the different views of mother is really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So I have all these wonderful memories of lovely things my mum did. I'm not saying everything was perfect by any stretch, but really lovely things that I've taken into my adult life. And I have a sister who says, I don't have a single positive mothering memory.
Wow.
And that just cuts me up. I think, how can that be possible?
Wow.
It was the same mother.
Yeah.
But then that particular sister had a brother born 9 months or 11 months later.
Oh, wow.
So her experience is going to be different from mine, where I had, a good 5 years before another sibling came along.
Wow.
All those things factor in as well.
Yeah.
And some people are just born looking at the cup half empty. And it doesn't really matter what you do. It's always going to be half empty.
Yeah. Wow, we're so complicated, aren't we? Crazy
Yeah,
humans.
yeah, precisely. Precisely.
Yeah, something else that was coming to mind for me there, where you were touching a little bit on astrology. I've been told with our own daughter that she has Cancer rising, so she, just kind of adds to the sensitivity and
sensitivity.
yeah, you know, just kind of wanting to be in her little shell and maybe not wanting to be around people so much. And what's kind of the challenge for me there is other people's reactions to that. You know, this again coming back to this idea of the socialization, right? How is she going to get socialized, and why you know, why is she hiding next to your leg, and why isn't she being all social, all that kind of stuff. What kind of guidance do you have around that kind of stuff, dealing with other people's opinions?
With someone who has Cancer strong in the chart like that, and certainly the ascendant, if we look at the ascendant as like the front door of a house, it just tells you what the front door is like. It doesn't tell you what every room inside the house is like.
Yeah.
So with your daughter, what they're seeing is the front door, and the front door is the Cancerian. You know, if we think of Cancer the crab, it moves sideways. It never moves forward.
Yeah.
So this is who she is. It doesn't mean she's necessarily shy, and it doesn't mean that she's not socialized. It means she moves sideways.
Yeah.
You know, that's how she approaches something. But also when we look at Cancer, what do we see? We see nurturing and protection, and so all those things are going to be part of who she is. And as she gets a bit older and feels a little bit more, you know, the sense of her own feet under her legs, she can still move sideways, but people will perhaps see more of those other things, that nurturing side, that part of her that'll want to take care of plants or children, or, you know, anything that she can nurture in that way.
Thank you.
But you know what? Even if she had, you know, a Sagittarius ascendant, which is just out there and live of the party and all the rest of it, you would find that somebody would still find something else to criticise. They'd say, well, actually, she's too bold, or she's too brash, or she's too freedom-loving, or whatever. You know, people always find something to criticise in your child. You know, it's like it's their God-given right to tell you what you've done wrong. But as a parent, it's just important to understand your child, not to try and change them or fix them, but to understand them. So, for example, my younger daughter has Virgo rising, which isn't dissimilar from Cancer rising in terms of that front door, if you like, or what people first see. So in her case, she really needs to suss out who's around her and what's happening, and know everything that's going on in that environment before she'll open her mouth. And, you know, that's changing a little bit as she gets older and feeling she can speak up a bit sooner. But once she feels safe, you can't shut her up. And then it's interesting when I see my adult friends who have a similar positioning and that sense of, you know, not so easy in that initial social situation, but then once they get going, they're fine. And, you know, I wouldn't dream of saying to any of them, oh, well, you obviously weren't socialised or whatever, because actually most of them did go to school. And again, you know, it's an example, you know, so my daughter having that shy front door, and my husband and I have the opposite, you know, where we can go and talk to any stranger. You know, it's not an issue for us, and just be friendly and whatever. And there were a number of times over the years where I thought, how have I got a daughter that's, you know, shy and whatever? What have I done? But obviously, as the years have gone by and my study of astrology, it's like, well, I actually haven't done anything. Because it's, you know, her default mechanism, if you like, and we all have one. You know, in many ways, the ascendant it tells a story of our birth, or our first stories we tell to ourselves about life.
So you mentioned something else in there that I'm curious your thoughts on. This idea that parents and other people are often out to kind of like criticize how other people are going around things. And I feel like, you know, it's such an individual path, parenting, and it's, you know, like you hear it's kind of like the most challenging thing that you might do in your life. And, you know, I've experienced that where I've been with our daughter and people have said things, you know, when she's right there, kind of criticizing like the way that she is, just like her being. And I'm curious, you know, over your years of parenting, how have you dealt with those kind of situations where people say things in front of your child and the child understands what's going on? And, you know, in terms of the authenticity, like how do you kind of manage those situations so that your child feels safe and honored?
Well, I think the child, if the child knows you are their first protector, that makes a huge difference. So feeling like you can be articulate and assertive and actually speak up and say what's appropriate, which I know isn't always easy, but it's amazing how confident you can become as a human being when you start down that path, and speak up about things.
Yeah.
Because it isn't always a case where you can remove the child or, continue the conversation elsewhere.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to deal with whatever's happening on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's addressing the other person, acknowledging what they've said, but letting them know if it's actually, not accurate or not appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
Again, it comes back to that cultural thing where children are not regarded almost as equals or even human beings sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I remember speaking with another parent about this topic recently, and they shared something that it really resonated for me. I was saying, gosh, like, how do I protect my child in those kind of situations where people just kind of say stuff and kind of don't even think that the child can, like, hear them or understand them or something. And I was saying, how do I protect my child? And this person said to me they felt like it's not about trying to protect, because you can't, like, always protect everything. It's more about, like, what kind of interpretation do you offer of the situation. And that felt really valuable for me. I felt like, oh yeah, that's something I can do. I can, kind of handle the situation in the moment, and then, maybe explain it a bit more afterwards, like, from my point of view. Yeah, I was glad to hear that. Gave me a tool. Yeah.
Because it's very easy to be able to think of what you might say afterwards, down the track. It's that being able to think on your feet, isn't it?
Right. So looking into your future with your children, you mentioned that I think your oldest is going away to university soon, and what do you kind of foresee in terms of maintaining that golden thread that you mentioned? Like, what do you think that's going to look like?
Well, it's a really interesting thing, because for me, I left home when I was 16, so 2 years younger than she is, and I moved 2,000 kilometres away from my parents.
Wow.
So I have no memory of how my mother, I have no experience, rather, of how my mother parented me through that.
Wow.
I just left home and, got a job. So I've got no role modelling, if you like. It feels all completely brand new. What I'm hoping is that she will, in her first year being in halls of residence, have a sense of security of people around her, and that she will, phone, write, come home every so often, or we'll go and visit her and connect in that way.
Yeah.
But I feel a lot of it is going to need to come from her. Again, that idea of the toddler walking away from the mum and looking back.
Right.
So for her to know that we're always here, but not for her to feel like I'm checking up on her every 2 minutes as well.
Yeah.
But I know for her in particular, there's that sense, or both of them, of the family traditions we have, and making sure that she's still around and part of those.
Right.
That sense of family being strong, and even down to the meals we've shared and things like that, and being able to still have those memories and try and recreate them in some way.
Right. Yeah, lovely. So, when you look ahead into that space, and maybe both of your girls have gone off to do some things, do you have that kind of empty nest fear that seems to be something that comes up for women at that point? Or how is it for you? Because I know you have so many kind of passions and talents and things that you're doing for yourself. What does that look like?
Well, I don't know if I should be embarrassed to say this, but I'm coming into what is called the selfish phase of my life. and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Because my daughters are 22 months apart in age, and I feel like I really spent myself, if you like. I really gave everything to them, particularly those, first 8 to 10 years, just so full on.
Yeah.
And even though they're in school now, there is still a sense of it's, still full-time parenting and whatever.
Right.
And obviously I will miss them because you know what it's like even when you've had visitors and they go and the energy in the house is different. There's going to be no question of that.
Right.
But I'm not someone who has ever sat around twiddling my thumbs.
Yeah.
There'll always be plenty to do. It's more on that emotional level, and but I really feel excited for them about them going out into the world because I remember that feeling, that sense of power and adventure and excitement, and I want them to have that. I want them to think, oh wow, this is a brilliant world. It's actually really exciting, and to make the most of it, not to be fearful, because I think it's quite common, at that age when they leave home, of, oh, you won't get a job and you'll do 3 years of university for nothing, all that sort of stuff. And I don't want them to have that. I want them to just be happy and enjoy life.
Right.
But the empty nest syndrome, it'll probably be more like, oh, I'll be able to tidy my nest now. A little less washing to do, and yeah.
And so I know something that comes up a lot in conversation for me with other kind of new mums is this feeling like I can't get anything done, because because the child becomes, such a huge focus. And especially, if you've come from a place where you're used to, just kind of doing projects whenever you want to and those kind of things. And then suddenly that window just doesn't feel like it's there. And also just even on the level of the mother kind of filling her own cup, taking care of herself and doing things to nurture herself so that she feels available to, give and give and give. What kind of things would you share on that theme to kind of encourage and support new mothers?
I think obviously it's going to depend on the individual situation and if there is a partner in the picture as well. So for the sake of our conversation, let's assume there is a partner in their life. It's about asking more. I think we get really caught up into this idea that we have to do everything. Instead of saying, well, actually, I can't. I'm human. I'm tired. I need this or I need that. Or I need to go out for 2 hours with my friends. And to be able to rely on that partner.
Right.
And I think one of the things that can become quite common is women thinking that men aren't up for the job, because they can't actually manage to look after the child and make the dinner or vacuum the floor, that sort of thing. They can just look after the child.
Right.
And obviously that's not the case for all men, but I hear it often enough to know that it's quite common. And because of that, then we carry this burden of guilt of, oh, I actually can't go out because, the dinner won't be made because they'll be so busy looking after the child or whatever.
Right.
But the more they get used to it, eventually they can start to multitask a little bit. But it's really about asking. I think we just don't do that enough as mothers. And making that self-care a priority. Obviously there are times where it's really hard to do that. You've got this newborn, or your husband's working 14-hour days, you've got no family. It's hard. And that's when I would say, get off Facebook. Go to bed with your baby. I think that's, as wonderful as Facebook is, or any sort of online thing, if you like, it can also be a mother's downfall as well, because it stops her getting sleep and rest. The light from the computer is wiring her up, so she's not going to sleep as well, and so many different things you can do to look after yourself at that most fundamental level. So even if you're not getting time away or whatever, even within the home, you can really take care of yourself. A lavender bath or lavender on your pillow if you don't have time for a bath. Gentle music. Reading a quiet book before bed. It's that slowing down thing as well. Instead of thinking, I've got to go, I've got to write an email, or I've got to do this. Actually, you don't. You don't have to do any of that. You can just be.
Yes.
The world doesn't stop. It just keeps going. Just pull yourself back from it, really.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of the biggest challenge for new mothers who I speak to and I'm around is that it seems like such a huge shift in gears at this point because society seems like so fast and everything is like, you know, just hyper information overload all the time. And then when you switch from that to suddenly you have, you know, this little squirming, wiggly newborn who is kind of like a prehistoric animal in some sense that's just like landed in your hands.
With all the needs of that prehistoric animal, you know, all those biological needs, they're exactly the same regardless of what culture it's born into.
Right. Yeah, and it's you know, it's kind of like you have to slow down. It's like this huge shifting gears that is kind of, you know, might feel like it's being kind of forced upon you. And that can just feel like very weird and uncomfortable. And I, for myself, even like looking back to that newborn stage, I can see, even though I thought that I was like getting enough rest and, you know, doing the best to take care of myself, with hindsight now, I can see that I wasn't even doing that. Even though I thought I was, I can see that, you know, I could have done this and I could have slept more here. And, you know, it's like you can't even kind of imagine until you're in it, you know, what that kind of shift is going to feel like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's powerful. So I think I kind of covered all the areas that I was thinking about. And I think the main things that I am taking away from this are the importance of the honesty and authenticity. Overall, as you said, that would kind of be the main thing, is just really being who we are with our child. And then, you know, she can trust that, and then she always kind of has that to come back to as like a kind of safe zone. Yeah, and you know, of course, there are so many other threads in there. You know, the attachment parenting and maybe homeschooling or you know, different things around communication. But I feel like that's a really good way to kind of sum everything up. Is the honesty and the authenticity. Is there anything else that you would love to add?
Well, I think that forgiveness of yourself for those days when it doesn't go so smoothly. Because with the best will in the world and with the highest ideals, we're human.
Yeah.
And, you know, some days we get up and for whatever reason, you know, it might be hormonal, it might be financial, whatever. So we just have days where we don't function so well and we may say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And it's about being able to forgive yourself, but also to be able to apologise.
Yeah.
And really sincerely mean it. You know, if you've said or done something wrong.
Yeah.
And to genuinely want to make amends.
Right.
Because it's very easy, whether it's with a partner or a child or any relationship we have, whether we've, you know, fallen out or there's been a disagreement, to then, you know, close the heart down, because again, that's a cultural thing, you know, protect yourself, you know, it's the whole adversarial thing going on.
Right.
But actually, you can only heal by opening your heart back up, you know, and really showing that vulnerability in there.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that reminder. So,
it's almost if you sort of imagine, you know, that there is a lily on your heart, if you like, and you know, when we're fighting or we're tense and then that lily's closed, but actually if we're opening to love and forgiveness, it's just going to blossom. It's just going to come wide open. And the other person has no choice but to blossom with you.
Yeah.
You know?
Right? It's like they either follow the vibration of love or...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's so exciting for me to think about where these children are going to go with their lives, who are being raised in this kind of way, you know, a different kind of way. And, you know, of course, as we said, you know, there's no guarantees, like the nature-nurture thing, who knows what they're going to do. But I feel like, there's so much excitement there in terms of a different way of communicating and being with people. So...
And also recognising that our children aren't mini-me's, you know, they are not replicas of us at any level.
Yeah.
You know, they might have our shaped eyes or whatever, or even have picked up one of our talents, but they are not us.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the problems we have as parents come from trying to want to make them like us, make them act like us, or think like us, or be like us.
Yeah.
And they're not. And if we just let go of that, it would change enormously.
Huh. Good to hear. So, again, Veronika's website, if anyone wants to go and check out all the amazing things that she's offering, is veronikarobinson.com. And you have so many different books. I didn't even realize how many books you have. I was looking at them on your website.
I'm losing count, actually. Every so often I think, I'm going to just count them because I can't remember how many.
Yeah, it's incredible. You have one. I didn't know you had a book on healing adrenal fatigue naturally. I was, wow, okay. And breastfeeding, you have a birthing book, unschooling, an article collection from the Mother magazine, which is, I haven't seen that book, but the Mother magazine is fantastic.
Great. I really, I like stretch marks. It's got articles from 2002 to 2009,
Wow.
some of my favourite articles that we've had in there. And even if someone didn't subscribe to the Mother, that book has so much in there.
Yeah.
Not just for a new parent, but wherever you are in your parenting journey.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing, that one. So much wisdom all like collected together into one place. That's really
and on so many different aspects of parenting as well.
Right. And then you have one about baby names and a blessing way book and a book about nurturing family and a cookbook and a children's book and 2 novels and more on the way, I guess.
So what am I missing? What haven't I done yet? I have one coming out soon called Cycle to the Moon, which is about menarche, menstruation and menopause, just celebrating that menstrual trinity.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the next books coming out.
Wonderful.
And one called Apron Strings, which is about just how I found joy as a stay-at-home mother. Just my thoughts on that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a couple of your books here, the Birth Keepers and the Drinks Are on Me, and they were definitely a huge blessing for us, as we kind of learnt about parenthood before having a child, and yeah, great offerings. And I mean, there's so much more on your website as well. You do astrology offerings and mentoring and all kinds of stuff. So check it out if there's any resonance there for you with all the wonderful things that Veronika's been sharing with us today. veronikarobinson.com. And thank you again so much, Veronika, for sharing all of this with us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it very much. And I just wanted to say, when I see photos of your daughter on Facebook, she just looks beautiful, and you can tell she's really thriving and flourishing. So really just let go of anything that people say to the contrary, because she just looks wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And if she wasn't thriving, that wouldn't radiate in her face. So, yeah, she's looking great.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. Thank you so much again, Veronika. And thanks everyone for listening, watching. We couldn't actually do video because we didn't have a good connection, but there's really valuable information in here. And I feel like, we can all take something from this and improve our intimate relationships in some way. So thank you for being here.